almost a decade or more. I mean, before the Paris Treaty, there was the other World Climate Kyoto Treaty, which we never got involved in. George W. Bush wouldn't have it. So it took a long time for us to get on board. But now that we are on board, it seems like it took a change in consciousness. And now that that consciousness has changed, there really is no going back. And I said this early on in talking about, what Trump may or may not do about the environment, that it's almost irrelevant because he will have to do something about it. And I think it's pretty, cut and dried. People see the effects now of climate change. People see the extreme weather events. People know the effects that that this is having. The government, our national security people know and understand that climate change presents a serious threat to United States security and prosperity. Congress people, military officers are calling attention to the consequences of climate change, and they include the destabilizing effects of storms and drought and floods. When people are starving, when they're not able to grow their own food, it creates destabilization. And when things are destabilized, not so nice things happen. The effects of climate change could overwhelm disaster response capabilities and can cause humanitarian disasters across the globe. Fights over water or food will lead to political violence. So much of what we're seeing with this Islamic State and these terrorist attacks is fueled by their ability to go into places where there is this destabilization, where people are starving, are hungry, and to use that as a way to galvanize. So here are 4 very real ways in which climate change affects our national security. Climate change puts coastal areas at risk. Hurricane Sandy taught us a huge lesson about this. Remember Hurricane Sandy? Its effects were worsened by the fact that the sea level at New York Harbor had risen by a foot since 1900. So in about a century's time, the sea level had risen by a foot. And this is the beginning of the front lines of this threat that's posed by climate change. Critical infrastructure, major military installations, and hurricane evacuation routes, they're increasingly vulnerable to these impacts, such as higher sea levels, storm surges, and flooding exacerbated by climate change. Sea level rise seems to be the most difficult and the most impactful. And that, coupled with storm surge, continues the risk of major coastal impacts on transportation infrastructure. So if our coasts are impacted, then we can't get food in or out. We can't get goods in or out. It can include temporary and or permanent flooding of airports, ports and harbors, rail lines, tunnels, and bridges. Now, the changing Arctic poses risks to other parts of the country. According to a May 2013 report, the Arctic region offers a vivid case study It shows how climate change and national security are intertwined. Temperatures in the Arctic are rising at twice the rate of the rest of the world on average, and melting glaciers and land-based ice sheets contribute to rising sea levels. And as we saw with Hurricane Sandy, when the sea level rises, it impacts the impact of storms is drastically increased. Rising ocean temperatures are causing northward range shifts of certain fish species. This affects ocean ecosystems and the communities and the economies that depend on them. The changing Arctic could lead to global changes in ocean-based food security. So this can place additional burdens on economies, societies, and institutions around the world. Climate change, number 3, climate change poses risks to the infrastructure. Climate change may overwhelm the capacities of critical infrastructure, causing widespread disruption of essential services across the country. According to a Department of Homeland Security review, extreme weather events are already affecting the production and distribution of energy, causing disruptions in the electricity supply. That's why you have blackouts in certain parts of this country and in other countries across the world. Secondly, an increase in summer temperatures and decrease in winter temperatures means an increase in net electricity use. So you're going to use more electricity because it's warmer. Thirdly, sea levels rise. Extreme storm surges, higher tides, and climate-related changes in water availability threaten the coastal infrastructure. So we're back to the coast. And then the fourth reason is that climate change increases demands on military resources. According to the Department of Defense, climate change will affect various missions, including overseas disaster and humanitarian relief, Arctic response and instability within and between foreign nations. Climate change will directly impact U.S. military readiness, according to that report. And additionally, it will also impact the design of current and future weapons systems to account for extreme weather. Unusual rains and flooding cost $64 million in damages to 160 facilities at an Army installation in the Southwest. Several Air Force early warning and communication installations are and continue to be impacted by the melting ice and rising sea levels. And record-breaking rainfall and flash flooding has overwhelmed the Department of Energy's Pantex plant, responsible for assembling and disassembling nuclear weapons. And so when President Obama was in office, this was something that was high on his agenda. And he's been quoted as saying, that there's no challenge that poses a greater threat to future generations than climate change. And that it poses immediate risks to our national security. Now, keep in mind, much of what's happening, much of the impacts are things we're going to feel anyway, because, how do they say that? Barn door's already been opened, the horses have gotten out. And a lot of this is, in a way, like closing the barn door after the horses have gotten out. Not that it's not necessary, it certainly is. But its effects, the effects of our bringing down of these greenhouse gases, will be felt years down the line. But what we're experiencing now are the results of our past actions. So what this accord was meant to do was to take action that will hopefully mediate in future years the effects of this climate change. But it was also meant to support developing nations who are the ones that are most impacted by these climate events, by these rising sea levels. These are communities that get wiped out when these floods happen. And so part of that agreement was to contribute to a fund amongst all of these 196 nations to help support those nations that are most severely affected by the results, by the impacts of climate change that we caused through our developing or through our use of our energy consumption and so forth and so on. It was a way of taking responsibility for what we've done to the environment and putting it right. And now, sadly, that effort is stalled. Now here's the good news, okay? According to the agreement, according to that Paris Accord, any country can pull out, but it takes 3 years to do so. And while nothing in the agreement is binding, we will still be in that agreement for 3 years, and we will still be expected to live up to the agreement until such time as we are out. So now, does that mean that those funds that have been allocated will continue to be put in? Well, I don't know. Much depends on, what this president directs, but considering the blowback he's gotten, I think there's enough momentum, there's enough change in consciousness that will keep the momentum going, keep us involved, even though we're making a big show of not being involved right now. So, that being said, the Hioka medicine helps us when our world gets turned upside down to recommit to those things that we really believe most in and hold dear. And that may be the most positive result of what's currently going on in our American political system. We'll keep talking about it.